Inside the bubble. This 2026 Tamil Nadu election offered me an opportunity to observe the working of an electoral process from the perspective of a political party. I was able to involve myself and contribute at various levels of the party, from the top leadership to the ground level. I now compare it with myself in 2021, when I was an enthusiast with my political understanding limited to content in the public space. In contrast, this year I was able to further broaden my observations. Just like most of the left, I too wanted DMK to win in 2026, which eventually failed. Unlike many other defeats of the past, this felt different to me because of two main reasons, one being the total unpredictability of the event, and the second being my personal involvement in this election. I felt I should document my observations, particularly from the perspective of DMK. The scope of this article will primarily involve an analysis of DMK's organizational structure and its impact on Tamil Nadu's political ethos of 2026. Understanding the result. I write this article almost 2 months after the results. In these 2 months, various theories and reasons have been proposed by different individuals and parties. I somewhat feel these are either emotional responses or mere quick generalized judgments. One of the common perspectives was attributing the defeat purely to social media, Instagram in particular. DMK boosted its social media presence after the elections through active resharing, commenting, posting stories, etc. These were done especially after DMK's IT wing was criticized by its own supporters. Many DMK cadres even started reconsidering their own belief that ground presence is more important than social media. The scrutinizing trend is not just restricted to the social media argument, rather, many other core trademark ideas of DMK have been subjected to self-criticism recently, which includes dependence on coalition parties, anti-union politics, underplaying new political aspirants, and surprisingly, even democracy. Much of this is more than just retrospection, it has turned into diffidence, self-doubt, regarding their own core political principles. First of all, let us admit the fact that the victory of a 2-year-old TVK has shuffled the deck of politics. While admitting that, we should also understand a lesson from history to stop the rumination and unhealthy self-doubt. A historic analogy to end the self-doubt. A social structure or group being highly organized and technologically advanced does not mean it is invincible. Especially, the belief that it faces no threat from a culturally or technologically inferior group is a myth that has been disproved by history. The Song dynasty of China, which gave gunpowder weapons to the world, had an army highly trained in martial arts. They possessed superior forts and state-of-the-art knowledge in general science and technology. Yet they lost to the grassland horsemen, the Mongols, who had a few exceptional military and survival strategies but were far less technologically advanced than the Song. Similarly, the mighty Roman Empire, which was the superpower of its time, was defeated by the Huns and northern Germanic tribes, referred to as barbarians. Does this mean that the scientific approach and technological advancement did not help? How do we understand this from an evolutionary perspective? I am not villainizing or even downgrading the Mongols or the Germans here. At the same time, I'm not generalizing history, rather I just want to give another perspective to understand the two different approaches of mankind, one being an emotion-driven and the other being the reason or rule-based scientific approach. Not just the Mongols or the Huns, even in modern history we have seen an emotion-driven communist Vietnam or the fundamentalist Taliban achieve victory over America, which had a far greater scientific and technological advantage. For an American soldier, it is a job to reason, but for a Taliban counterpart, it is a jihad, a holy war, an emotion. But the real lesson to be drawn here is that history is not about who wins, rather, it is about what sustains. For example, after the Mongols took over China, there was a culturally transformative period which can be termed as Mandarinization. That is, the Mongols adopted the Chinese way of life and technologies like gunpowder weapons, architectural styles, and even cultural factors such as family relations and language from the Song dynasty. When we say, the fittest survives, it is not just about individual humans groups winning, it is about which survival mechanism survives the test of time. Moreover, emotion can't be a driving force in the long run. Anyone who tried to do so would have failed miserably, leaving the people who adopted better scientific and rational ways to sustain the test of time. I feel we should apply this lesson from history to the current election results too. A century-old, time-tested, reason-based ideology and a party structure which has evolved through time, being defeated by the emotional appeal of a 2-year-old politician with a far less organized party structure, aligns with our previous examples. As in the historical examples, TVK too played on that strategy of emotion. The party's leader was portrayed not as a professional but as one among the people, a brother, an uncle, a familiar figure whom people frequently saw on their everyday television, a person whose movies, songs, and dialogues had become a part of people's personal memories and lifestyles, festivals, special occasions, and with whom people associated themselves. But in the case of DMK, the role of emotion is comparatively less. Similarly, not all that TVK catered to was emotional. We are merely trying to understand the major factor that got votes for these two parties. DMK's scientific approach and its yield. Through the experience of interacting with ground-level DMK functionaries, I understood the level of rule-based order and organizational discipline in that party. Years of practical experience have passed down generations of knowledge, which have equipped ground-level functionaries with the skills needed for any political party to function. From crowd gathering, intra-party protocols, government office procedures, electoral procedures, and manner of conduct with officers and the media, DMK party cadres are inherently aware and experienced. Despite the loss, the DMK alliance secured almost 34% of the votes, and this was despite a drastic vote split due to a three-cornered fight. The 34% includes not just the core vote base of DMK but general swing voters too. I would not just attribute this considerably higher percentage of votes to the party's ground-level workers but also appreciate their role in keeping the TVK wave a silent one. Anyone would acknowledge the fact that TVK's ground presence was minimal before the elections. I myself rarely encountered any ground-level clashes during the elections between DMK and TVK, which is the unwritten norm between any rival parties. This was purely because of DMK's assertion of dominance at the ground level and the systematic attention they paid even to small details such as wall paintings and flags, thereby altering public perception. This ensured that the TVK wave was not openly visible, unlike other political waves such as the 2014 Modi wave, the 2019 YSR wave, or the 2012-22 Aam Admi Party wave. There is usually a general trend among Indian voters to vote for a winning party. If the TVK wave had been openly visible, then the vote share of the TVK party would have been much higher. The fact that many TVK voters themselves did not expect TVK's victory proves that many might not have cast their votes for TVK by underestimating its electoral success. Therefore, by countering the visibility of the TVK wave, DMK workers played a significant role in reducing the victory margin. Overestimating the role of social media. That steel frame of DMK, that is, the organizational structure, needs repairs and upgradations, discussed in the later part. Without primarily addressing those changes, the party and the cadres themselves believe that Instagram played a huge role in this election result. I do not underestimate the role of social media in this election, however, its target audience was largely already under the ambit of fandom. However, the narrative set on Instagram overflowed into households and then to the streets, creating a domino effect and indirectly influencing secondary audience voters. Even without an updated social media infrastructure, DMK could have convinced the secondary voters and confined TVK's voter base largely to its existing fandom. Addressing social media as a primary concern largely undermines the essential changes that are needed in its organizational structure. Earlier, when I expressed my views about the practical knowledge of a DMK cadre, I consciously did not mention ideological clarity, despite it being better than that of other parties. I find there is huge scope for ideological penetration within the DMK's ground-level cadres themselves. When this is the case, preaching the ideology to Gen Z is what I call an overestimation of Instagram social media. Undermining the problems in the organizational structure and undermining the groundwork would be contrary to the historical lessons we saw earlier, the defeated Romans adopting the tribal German way of life. As DMK has very little resources to spend, and if it wants to increase its voter base, the active Instagram-using sector would be the last to be convinced. Instead, while maintaining minimum returns in social media spaces and following a sustainable long-term plan, DMK should largely redirect its available resources to other feasible sectors for its short-term goals. I do not believe in the quote, "My enemy chooses my weapon." Rather, I believe one's weapon should not be chosen by one's rival. DMK must choose its own field of battle to its advantage. Clearly, neither Gen Z nor Instagram is one of them. Why can't a counter-emotional narrative be played against TVK? Let us take an example from Tamil Nadu politics itself. AIADMK is a party that was built on emotion. Both Mr. Manager and Ms. Jayalalitha primarily prioritized an emotional approach. They used their cult status to keep the party intact and in order. However, DMK has prioritized a scientific approach by using rules and ideology to organize and run the party till now. To understand the importance of a scientific approach, let us take the example of gathering a crowd for a political rally. When a gathering involves Mr. Manager or current TN Chief Minister, there is no need to make an effort to gather a crowd, as it can happen organically. But what about other leaders? Or what is the current state of such parties without the cult figure? DMK, however, has a method of gathering crowds. They work in a decentralized way by handing over specific responsibilities in terms of the number of people to be mobilized at various levels: zone, district, union, branch, booth. A union-level secretary ensures that all branch-level secretaries gather the stipulated number of people. He does not actively involve himself in branch-level crowd gathering. Similarly, the district-level secretary ensures that all union-level secretaries have achieved their stipulated targets. Even logistics-related responsibilities are decentralized and shared. I am very sure that any reader, by this point, could raise the criticism that most of these crowds are paid. I personally do not want to disagree with that criticism. However, the point here is to understand that a systematic, pre-existing scientific approach followed by DMK is more sustainable than emotional crowds. Paid crowds should eventually be replaced by ideologically driven individuals, which is a separate topic. By following this systematic approach, there is no need for a single individual to become the focal point of the party. I would like to share one of my personal experiences in this regard. In the course of making a list of poll promises that could be made locally, I was engaging with a few stakeholders at the local level. One particular constituency had a considerable population of palm tree farmers. The DMK district secretary of that particular constituency directed me to a union secretary who had good knowledge of that particular sector. Within an hour of contacting him, I reached his office expecting that he would brief me about certain issues faced by that particular community. However, when I reached his office, along with him, 3 branch-level cadres were present, and up to 10 palm farmers were waiting there. This was something exceptional, as all this had been arranged within an hour. The logistics for all those farmers must have been coordinated, along with some kind of refreshments, all within an hour. It is important to note that I do not hold any party position, nor am I a public figure. Still, this was possible because of the party's practical, scientific approach. DMK's fatigue and fault lines. The previous section dealt with DMK from an optimistic perspective. That does not mean it is an infallible organization. Let us try to understand it using the corporate concept of work culture: strong, weak, and good or bad output. A strong work culture means that employees have a good understanding with one another and with the leadership. However, that obviously does not translate into an ethical or good work output. For example, a terrorist organization might have a strong work culture with minimal conflict of interest among its members, but that does not mean their work is ethical. Therefore, it is a strong work culture with bad output. In contrast, in a bureaucratic government office, the work culture might be weak due to red tapeism, but it is a public office with good intentions, therefore, it is a weak work culture with good output. There can be other combinations possible. By understanding this, let us first analyze DMK's work culture, whether it is strong or weak, and then analyze the output aspect, that is, whether it is good or bad. How corporate-style centralization eroded DMK's steel frame and weakened its work culture. In my own personal experience, I should admit that my workplace-related politics was much more tiring than actual political politics. I was spending a larger part of my efforts managing and overcoming intra-organizational issues and hierarchy, considerably more than what any functional organization should require. Later, I realized that this was not just a personal experience but something many enthusiasts had to face. These conflicts were not just intra-party but also involved other stakeholders such as strategy firms. Post-results, many news outlets and even party cadres started openly addressing these factors to such an extent that the leader of the party-owned strategy firm had to respond to these issues. Neo Power Centers, a political consultants. After the 2021 elections, strategy firms emerged as a trophy, status symbol, rather than a necessity. Many DMK leaders had multiple teams, which clearly lacked coordination among themselves and did not align with the party. This created temporary neo-power centers and new chains of command, which were completely new to the party. This disturbed the decades-old party structure and weakened the work culture. Most of these political strategy firms run for profit with minimal political aspirations. Most importantly, they are not confined to a single state, therefore clearly lacking an in-depth understanding of the local political ethos. Many such strategic firms are not even involved in full-time political work, they merely play the role of consultants in a broader sense. These firms hire locals, but even this hiring process is clearly not based on their ideology or passion, rather, they are hired to suit the standards of the company. During their work with taller leaders, these employees receive attention and respect from other party workers because of their association with such leaders. In most cases, these employees take advantage of this, thereby creating a conflict of interest between the firm, themselves, the leaders, and the party cadres. During my tenure on the ground, I have rarely met members from the party-owned strategic firm. They prepare graphic designs for banners, pamphlets, create taglines and hashtags, and most eagerly collect pictures and videos of various party events. Apart from these, I have not seen their participation elsewhere in district-level party work. Maintaining the district secretary's social media account, handling the local media, or at least overseeing various party activities would be the bare minimum, I guess. Since the party-owned firm's connection with the party leadership was beyond question, and it was the same firm which devised the strategies and, at the same time, oversaw their implementation, therefore the process lacked accountability. As mentioned earlier, the top-down approach of the firm disregarded ground realities. I was clearly able to see that a few party activities, like membership drives, Ungaludan door-to-door campaigns, Velam Tamil Pengal, and one-on-one meetings with functionaries, did not perform as intended. Many DMK functionaries were agitated, as many of these schemes required inorganic methodologies, such as paying for each new member enrolled under the membership drive to meet its deadlines. Most of whose expenditure fell on the district-level administration. Moreover, the cadres themselves felt that many such activities did not yield returns equivalent to the resources spent. Yet many of these grievances rarely reached the top leadership, as the cadres feared the strategy team's involvement in the party. It was common to see even small private strategic firms misusing their authority. This exploitation was purely built upon the confusion among the party cadres regarding the firm's role. Earlier, I had once done election work for an independent candidate in the 2026 Bihar election. I was clearly able to feel the difference in the relationship between party cadres and such firms in Bihar. The state's long-term exposure to handling such firms has clearly helped them understand that these so-called strategic firms are merely event management groups. They held these firms accountable and expected them to work for the party cadres, unlike in Tamil Nadu, where I saw the party catering to every need of the employees of these firms. There were instances in Tamil Nadu where a district secretary had to fear an employee of a firm who was in his age of 20s, with barely any understanding of the inner workings of the party, just because he might send a negative remark to the leadership. This has largely undermined the morale of the party workers. Most district secretaries in DMK have ample ground knowledge and experience, yet they were suddenly made irrelevant by the party, as they had to consult such firms even for something as small as a graphic design. I met a person who was almost in his 70s in a rural part of Tamil Nadu during election work. He was a financially stressed daily wager who was paid to participate in a small rally. I tried to strike up a conversation with him after observing his enthusiasm in raising slogans during the rally. He said he had almost 50 years of experience as a booth-level worker for DMK and had by-hearted the details of all the voters and their political alignments in his booth. Further, he said that, just by a sight, he could recognize fake voters. After pausing for a while, he asked me, "How much would you guys charge the party if you had the same skills that I possess?" In crores? Tracing the trails of the centralization trend. Tamil people and their culture of naming are, in themselves, an interesting topic. It is common to see them show their gratitude by carrying the names of the people they respect across generations. My grandfather was the eldest among his 10 siblings and was also the first educated person in the family. Therefore, he had the opportunity to name many of his younger siblings. Surprisingly, a couple of them were named after DMK leaders, are not the most revered or well-known leaders, but local district-level leaders. However, he had no party affiliation either before or later in his life. When I inquired, he said that a particular district secretary had brought numerous schemes by pressurizing the bureaucracy and had also inspired the youth of the locality by organizing various protests against Hindi imposition, the Elam issue, etc. DMK is a party was built on such local leadership. This reflected a healthy, decentralized, cadre-based party. But currently, how many party members themselves can name all the district secretaries of the party? Perhaps only a few. How and why did it change? When the party tried to centralize power by reducing the autonomy and responsibility of lower-level party leaders, their relevance within the party shrank. The centralization trend was started to maintain order in the party and sustain tough times, i.e. when they do not form government for long periods like 1975 to 87 and 2011 to 21. Power got consolidated in the hands of a few leaders, almost like an oligarchy. During the early 21st century, this centralization trend slowly started with local feudalization, i.e., consolidating zone-wise influence, or simply one powerful leader per zone community. Sometimes such local feudal powers became overwhelmingly powerful and even posed a threat to the leadership. Therefore, in the last few years, this centralization trend has drastically increased, completely undermining local leaders. Further, decreasing the number of assembly constituencies under each district secretary and appointing various other parallel posts, such as election in charge, assembly in charge, district minister, and zonal in charge, all of which had the same niche as that of the district secretary, created conflicts of interest and undermined the role of the district administration. District secretaries reported that it was tiring to consult each of them, along with the so-called strategic firms, before every action. Sometimes, the minister in charge even interfered in insignificant matters like poster design, leaving no room for the district secretary's autonomy. Moreover, the political aspirations of the minister's assembly in charge further complicated the situation, as they tried to completely take over the district administration's control, far beyond their designated role. The role of the district administration and the posts under it was reduced to that of mere managers of the high command. Their scope for creativity and autonomy was completely curbed, and they could no longer become local heroes as they once did. Moreover, other lower-level posts, such as union and branch secretaries, have become completely irrelevant or unattractive to party cadres. This is actually the liquidation of the steel frame of DMK. Illegal contract-based financial commissions, which were earlier distributed to local functionaries before reaching the leadership, have been centralized, leaving the lower-level cadres with no financial gain. Posts and contracts like government prosecutor, temple trustee, etc., were not easily accessible to a regular DMK cadre. Most of these posts' contracts were used for financial gains by the ministers. Many DMK cadres reported that many such positions were very easily bought by people from rival parties, as they were financially better off after 10 years of AIADMK rule. The district secretary had a minimal role in such appointments. This, in turn, increased bribe collection at the local level by some local functionaries, as they were forced to spend on party activities. Local-level functionaries became highly dependent on the party leadership for finances and favors. This was the case in AIADMK earlier, but DMK adopted it recently. I no way support an institutionalized bribe culture. It is definitely one of the factors contributing to a bad work culture output. My intention here is to explain the various facets of the centralization trend within DMK. Neo-power centers are the pseudo-bureaucracy. The concentration of power has not just made the oligarchs of the party powerful, but also the pseudo-bureaucracy around them, i.e., from drivers to personal secretaries of the party leadership. They enjoy the extraordinary powers accumulated around their leaders as a spillover effect. Similar to the strategic firms, this pseudo-bureaucracy too emerged as a parallel power center. Such people exerted influence not just over party affairs but also over government administrative matters during the last tenure. They were so influential that even second-level leaders had to tolerate them to avoid getting into their bad books. If second-level leaders face such difficulties, one should imagine the status of an ordinary cadre. Even such leaders had developed a pseudo-bureaucratic ecosystem around them. Most of these pseudo-bureaucrats try to maintain their monopoly over access to their respective leaders. The reason I term them as pseudo-bureaucrats is that they mostly follow bureaucratic red tapeism, especially in matters that might undermine their own role. Many of them do not understand that they are seen as the face of the particular leader they work for. The general public, and even the local cadres, tend to associate the conduct and behavior of such people with the leader. This creates resentment towards the leader even without any direct interaction. I felt that if these positions were held by informed party workers, then they would not only be responsible to the people but would also be trained in public handling and politics, thereby creating a skillful party ethos. Criticisms on party cadres. It is important to understand why the leadership started neglecting the party cadres and instead trusted private players. This is because the quality of a party worker has largely become a mere headcount. Let us admit the open secret here, most of the crowds at party events are paid. This is because the party, which once attracted crowds simply to enjoy its language, has long become irrelevant among the general public. The ideology became limited to a few elites, and the rest of the party had to deal with day-to-day local issues, which rarely required ideological clarity. This trend can be clearly traced to the emergence of DMK, a party which organically attracted huge crowds. To match the support and crowds gathered by the film star-turned-politician Mr. Manager, no rational approach or ideology could be helpful. Moreover, the newly formed DMK encouraged the participation of non-ideological yet locally powerful people to counter DMK's infrastructure. This gave way for dominant caste leaders with the money and muscle power to rise through the party ranks, pushing ideologues away in both parties. This trend has resulted in an uninformed, blindly loyal crowd dominating the party. However, awarding top positions to leaders from other party has shaken the loyalty aspect too. It has made it obvious that any leader would fear having such a crowd around them, as they have the potential to overpower the leader himself. Therefore, they prefer an amateur over a party cadre, creating a vicious cycle within the party. This explains how mistrust has seeped into the party structure, further weakening the work culture. Whatever the reason may be, the alienation of cadres has widened the gap between the public and the leadership. Actual issues related to the party barely reach the ears of the leadership directly through the party cadres, thereby creating not just a weak work culture but also a bad output. Alienation of the public paved the way for a bad work output. For a commoner, the Indian bureaucracy has always been uninviting and unfamiliar. This is because the concept of the Indian bureaucracy was forged during the colonial era. The colonialist John Stuart Mill once recorded that the great success of our British Indian administration was that it was carried on in writing, when the majority of Indians were illiterate. Indian administration and bureaucracy were designed in a way that kept the general public away from them. India has experienced this structured alienation not just from the colonial era but also due to the caste system, which ensured knowledge asymmetries between castes, untouchability being one such example of this alienation. Considering this generational trauma, politics in India has largely tried to gain leverage from this emotion. From Gandhiji's choice of clothing to legends of Ayya Kamarajar, Indian politicians have always tried to reduce this alienation and connect with the people. They try to place themselves within the pronoun we, alongside the people. DMK's inception and its rationale. DMK's inception was actually an attempt to address this very issue against the landlord-dominated Congress Party. The landlord class, which gained immense power after independence, also consisted largely of traditional zamindars, who were distant from the general public. In contrast, DMK was a youth party whose cadres were mostly from the depressed classes and who proposed ways to end upper caste domination and distribute those economic and social opportunities to others. This was the prevailing public perception. Therefore, DMK shared a sense of fraternity with the public. However, down the line, the general public began to view a DMK party office in much the same way as they viewed a government office. This is because the party, in its 77-year journey, has slowly isolated itself from the general public and confined itself to a limited circle. DMK cadres started holding public offices in the government and the legislature, creating political elite groups within the party. This transferred the same perception that people had of the bureaucracy onto the DMK. When in power, the cadres have to defend the state machinery, which further alienates the people from them. Most importantly, the strong work culture made it highly impossible for a common political aspirant to climb through the ranks of the party, and nepotism started even at the grassroots, as political elites wanted to retain their power. Inevitably, in Indian society, caste is a major factor in power, therefore, castes with numerical and social strength started dominating the party. This left minimal room for oppressed castes within the party, paving the way for a bad work output. TVK, in contrast, plays the countergame of strengthening the emotional bond with the people. As discussed earlier, it portrays its own leader as one among the people, referring to himself as an uncle to children and a brother to his fans. Apart from this, most TVK cadres have not held any major public or government positions and therefore have not inherited any anti-incumbency. People feel that TVK is more approachable than DMK, at least as of now. How social media issued persona non grata for DMK. This alienation extends even into social media, not just Instagram, but also considerably intellectual spaces like Twitter X, where ideology still finds its relevance in discussions. When TVK used platforms like Instagram to consolidate and convert its leaders' mass appeal into political support, many online DMK sympathizers disassociated themselves from the general public by accusing them in ways that a non-electoral organization would. Speaking the language of Dravida Kazhagam, then Thai Periyar might be politically right, but then why was there a need for DMK and its peculiar electoral political language? There were instances where online DMK sympathizers carried an ideology fitness scale for each and every criticism from the general public. They engaged in knowledge shaming a neutral people and early TVK sympathizers. Even a few Dravidian ideology advocating influencers were sharply criticized for their neutral stand during TVK's initial stages. Criticizing the government was considered a direct attack on Dravidian ideology. A person who criticized an everyday issue in governance would be expected to be bashed with not just data points but also lectures on the history of Dravidian politics. These were not a few isolated events. The preachy attitude of such social media influencers has played a decisive role in pushing swing voters away from DMK and has also created a sense of alienation among the public. A segment of the general public has developed an aversion not just on Dravidian ideology but also to politics as a whole. This has paved the way for the emergence of apoliticism in Tamil Nadu. Most importantly, TVK harvested such apolitical votes. After the election results, this same ecosystem has largely tarnished the relationship between DMK and its former coalition parties. I do not defend or discuss the stands taken by such coalition parties, yet I, along with a few DMK cadres, understand the importance of maintaining cordial relations and respect for such parties. Respect does not mean coalition. To understand this better, I would like to share an article that I read in Money Control about the CEO of the San Francisco-based Rev Growth, Mr. Karthik Raja. He helped the employees he fired find another job. Further, he remarked on LinkedIn, "Not a bad person, just the wrong fit. How you fire people says more than how you hire." Similarly, a 2025 Forbes business article stated, "The way layoffs are handled before, during, and after it can have a lasting impact on company culture, morale, and trust." I feel it is important to understand that this principle is important not just for a company or a political party but for any organization. Many cadres of such coalition parties, who were drawn towards DMK due to their disagreement with their previous party, had unpleasant experiences when their former leaders were subjected to unconstructive criticism. It's better to remember, the online narrative was lost much before the ground, clearly proving the inefficiency of such targeted online attacks. I believe DMK, as a party, is very conscious of this fact, but the so-called online sympathizers barely understand the practical ground reality and are ill-bothered about its long-term impacts. But does it mean people have made the right choice? What Tamil Nadu loses without DMK. The previous section mostly dealt with criticism of DMK, but does that mean people voted with all their senses? Or, in other words, this section might give an idea of why I wanted DMK to win the election. It is important to understand that supporting DMK out of loyalty is not how a healthy democracy works. A large section of Tamil Nadu might have been beneficiaries of DMK's actions, but expecting loyalty from beneficiaries is not rational. DMK is more than just a few leaders, it is an institution built around an ideology. Just like any machinery or movement that lasts long, DMK too has its own wears and tears, as we discussed earlier. DMK deserves to be hailed a continuation of the Dravidian movement. Few might point out the flaws or deviations from the original Dravidian movement that DMK went through, but in that case, it is important to compare the movement with other case studies. Movements like the USSR, communism in Latin America, Pan-Arabism, or Indian movements like Kancha Ram's Bahujan politics, Mundal politics in the 1990s, Akali politics, etc., most of which are considerably younger than the Dravidian movement, have not outlasted the test of time. Any rational movement built on a reason rather than a emotion has largely vanished, much like in a similar fashion as our emotional movements. The USSR, which was dictated by its own principles, had to crumble under its own anti-incumbency. But the Dravidian movement, which started as an idea by Ayathi Thas Pandithar, was shaped into a movement by the Justice Party, refined as an ideology by Thantai Periyar, politically architected by Aragna Anna, and politically sustained by Kalania, is more alive than any other leftist movement. Despite being ideology-based, it is considerably easier for a communal or caste-related organization to survive, but for a rational leftist organization, it is much harder. One of the important strategies behind DMK survival is very peculiar and often less spoken about. After independence, when many ideological and leftist movements emerged with undemocratic and anti-establishment principles, since revolutionary movements are often emotionally appealing, DMK was extremely cautious about crossing that boundary. DMK strongly believed in non-violence and democracy. Even when the Union government used violence to curb early DMK movements, especially during the anti-Hindi agitation, DMK never resorted to violence, even in its own defense. This is also one of the reasons for the party's sustainability. Moreover, it has enabled DMK to be one such party which contests elections in a Hindu-majority state, yet calls itself anti-Sanatan and openly criticizes caste sentiments on its own stage. That itself is a democratic wonder. Social justice in DMK is institutionalized and not based on the courtesy of any individual leader. Social justice, or any social good stemming from the will or courtesy of a leader, is again an inequality in itself. Clarity regarding this is essential, especially considering the recent arguments that TVK has broken caste barriers in politics. As discussed earlier, DMK might have a slight institutional imbalance due to OBC domination, yet any reform to the structure will be more sustainable and reliable than mirage-like changes that may not be institutionalized. When national politics has almost evolved into a monopoly, along with increasing trends of untamed capitalism, the role of DMK in protecting state autonomy is uncompromisable. From the Finance Commission to delimitation, DMK's ecosystem carefully navigates to preserve state rights. The recent judgment regarding the pocket veto of a state governor will be marked as a crown jewel in India's constitutional history. This result has also disturbed a nationwide anti-BJP movement initiated by DMK through interstate conferences. To understand its impact, we need to consider a few post-election events. Recently, the scam related to the Ayodhya Ram Temple, where even many fundamentalists acknowledged the need for state control over temples, presented a large political opportunity for DMK. However, it remained relatively silent. This was because the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly was the topic of discussion, which eventually turned out to be nothing more than rhetoric. Similarly, other issues like ethanol-blended petrol or competitive examination-related scams were not even matters of discussion in Tamil Nadu, as DMK was fighting its own battles gifted by the People's Mandate. The People's Mandate has clearly reduced the standard of politics, as illustrated by the above examples. The fact that other proclaimed left parties were unable to politicize those events once again proves the need for DMK. Hence, as a leftist, I can't afford to lose DMK for a temporary, emotion-based, mirage-like politics. DMK currently is an excellent fabric that can be built upon. People might have prioritized their immediate concerns, such as corruption or the misbehavior of a few DMK ministers, over these long-term goals. But it is important that people understand the larger concept of DMK. For an electoral party like DMK, especially considering the limitations discussed earlier, it is extremely hard for this ecosystem to function the way it should. Electoral success is mandatory, along with rectifying its mistakes. By constantly disowning DMK, people push DMK to lose its ideological character and adopt political survival tactics. Hence, losing DMK is leaving the left guardless. The scope of this section is only to explain the optimistic side of DMK as an organization. I do not want to comment on the achievements it has made in the last 5 years as a government. But I feel this section would be incomplete if I did not talk about the contribution of DMK, especially its leader, Mr. M.K. Stalin, to the political ethos of Tamil Nadu. He has played a decisive role in creating a healthy political atmosphere in Tamil Nadu over the last 5 years. The revenge politics of the early 21st century was completely replaced by a far more decent political culture. I am obliged to record that this is one area where Mr. M.K. Stalin has outperformed his leader, Kalania. Way forward. Expecting that DMK, in its status quo, will come back to power and that the same old ministers will return to their seats can be a placebo for the party. It is important to understand the need for the revolutionary changes that DMK requires to achieve this. After this analysis, I feel it is feasible for the left to trust DMK for some more time before shifting to another base. By finding alternatives, we might further split the vote and waste DMK's infrastructure. The solidarity of the left will be very crucial in the upcoming age of populism across the globe. TVK's victory can also be viewed alongside other political patterns across the world. Stagnant economies have paved the way for populism-based political parties to come to power. Any rational group that thinks will definitely have differences of opinion. I am personally not a believer in illiberalism or liberal politics. However, in the political landscape of India, we need to understand that the left is destined to carry the liberals in order to counter conservatives' politics. But it is high time the left parties understood that liberalism in political opinion is different from liberalism in organization institution. When it comes to self-criticism within the organization, it is important to understand that such liberalism needs checks. There should be a rule-based order and, most importantly, brotherhoods within an organization, especially during times of crisis. DMK should win the trust of its own cadres and also trust them, as it is important to make the cadres feel that they are relevant. The top leadership should make regular efforts to interact, at least with the district wing secretaries, to understand the ground reality. Such interactions are not merely ceremonial but can actually improve the quality of statements made by the party leadership in public, much better than academic reports or speech pointers provided by strategic firms. Currently, it is more important to unite as an organization by addressing its internal obstacles immediately. Apart from organizational unity, the foremost task is to break the bubble in which we have isolated ourselves. The alienation that we discussed earlier should be addressed. Small-scale meetings where DMK supporters criticize the public should be redesigned to instead influence the public. People supporting DMK on social media should also be responsible for understanding the long-term impact of their actions. Winning public support is equally as important as defending ideology. It is important to play the game of democracy. The recent results have shattered the belief system of the DMK ecosystem. The party should see this as an opportunity and should take steps to restore confidence in its belief system and propagate its ideology, updating it wherever required, while ensuring that it penetrates through the ranks of both the party and the public. The cadres, too, should make an enthusiastic effort in this regard. Political mathematics and estimating preferences. Attributing TVK's victory purely to hero worship would be a wrong judgment. People who have long endured anti-incumbency have aligned themselves with a crowd which indeed was formed by cinematic influence. Therefore it is important to primarily maintain the 30% voter base that DMK has secured. Secondly, the party should invest in attracting an additional 10 to 15% of votes from the most feasible sectors. Unlike in the last 5 years, where DMK engaged in gimmicks like TamilNadu to attract Brahmin religious votes, such practices should be discarded, as they can affect DMK's core vote base. DMK should also think carefully before investing heavily in Gen Z voters, since a large proportion of them are far from convincible. In the short term, DMK must focus on people who voted for DMK in 2021 but not in 2026, as the probability of influencing them is higher. Similarly, they can target the next generation of voters who will be in the age group of 18 to 23 during the next assembly election. As a last preference, DMK can upgrade itself technologically to assert its dominance in social media algorithms as well. This can at least provide a deterrent to TVK's algorithmic superiority. Conclusive remark. Political scientists say that the collapse of the USSR marked the end of the revolutionary political aspirations of youth and aided rise of a political society. When one steps into the field of politics, criticism from society and family is something expected, but being looked down upon by people associated with the very same organization is unexpected, but it happens. When one tries to step beyond books and research, to connect with the ground where actual politics happens, the very system itself outcasts the individual. People in the political field themselves have unhealthy class-like inequalities based on one's role in politics. I feel this election result has given us a wake-up call to reconsider such constructs. Let us get on the ground, get dirty, materialize the theories we have learned, love the people, educate and organize them. It's okay to be political.